Welcome to Awake and Activate. Today we're going to do mind exercise number 4. Self. How do we identify ourselves? Are we using false means to identify ourselves? The value we hold within ourselves? Are we outsourcing how we view ourselves? Today, mind exercise 4. Self. Self. Self-image. Self-esteem. The term self concept is a general term used to refer to how someone thinks about, evaluates, or perceives themselves. To be aware of oneself is to have concept of oneself. Brewmeister 1999 provides the following self-concept definition: the individual's belief about himself or herself, including the person's attributes and who and what the self is. The self-concept is an important term for both social and humanistic psychology. Lewis, 1990, suggests that the development of the concept of self has 2 aspects. Number 1, the existential self. This is the most basic part of the self-scheme or self-concept, the sense of being separate and distinct from others, and the awareness of the consistency of the self. B, 1992. The child realizes they exist as a separate entity from others, and they continue to exist over time and space. According to Lewis, awareness of existential self begins as young as 2 to 3 months old and arises in part due to the relation the child has with the world. For example, the child smiles at someone smiles back, or the child touches a mobile and sees it move. Number 2, the categorical self. Having realized that he or she exists as a separate experiencing being, the child next becomes aware that he or she is also an object in the world. Just as other objects, including people, have properties that can be experienced in brackets, big, small, red, smooth, and so on, end bracket. So the child is becoming aware of himself or herself as an object which can be experienced and which has properties. The self too can be put into categories such as age, gender, size, or skill. 2 of the first categories can be applied are age, I am 3, gender, I am a girl. In the early childhood, the categories children apply to themselves are very concrete, e.g. hair color, height, and favorite things. Later, self-description also begins to include reference to internal psychological traits, comparative evaluations to how others see them. Carl Rogers in 1959 believes that the self-concept has 3 different components. Number 1, the view you have of yourself, in bracket self-image. Number 2, how much you value your place, or how much value you place on yourself, in bracket self-esteem or self-worth, in bracket. And number 3, what you wish you were really like, in bracket the ideal self, in bracket. Self-image, in bracket how you see yourself. This does not necessarily have to reflect reality. Indeed, a person with anorexia who is thin may have a self-image in which the person believes they are fat. A person's self-image is affected by many factors such as parental influences, friends, the media, etc. Kuhn, 1960, investigated the self-image by using the 20 statements test. He asked people to answer the question, "Who am I?" in 20 different ways. He found that the responses could be divided into 2 categories, or 2 major groups. These were social roles, or in bracket external or objective aspects of oneself, such as son, teacher, friend, end bracket, and personality traits, in bracket, internal or affective aspects of oneself, such as gregarious, impatient, humorous, end bracket. The list of answers to the question, who am I, probably include examples of each of the following four groups of responses. Number one, physical description. I am tall, I have blue eyes, etc. Number two, social roles. We are all social beings whose behavior is shaped to some extent by the roles we play. Such roles as student, housewife, or member of a football team not only help others to recognize us, but also help us to know what is expected of us in various situations. Number three, personal traits. These are the third dimensional of our self-description. I am impulsive, I am generous, I tend to worry a lot, etc. Number four, existential statements, in brackets, abstract ones. These can range from I am a child of the universe to I am a human being to I am a spiritual being, ... etc. Typically, young people describe themselves more in terms of personal traits, whereas older people feel more defined to a greater extent by their social roles. Self-esteem, in brackets, the extent to which you value yourself. Self-esteem, in brackets also known as self-worth, end bracket, refers to the extent to which we like, accept, or approve of ourselves, or how much we value ourselves. Self-esteem always involves a degree of evaluation, and we may have either a positive or a negative view of ourselves. High self-esteem, in bracket, we have a positive view of ourselves, end bracket. This tends to lead to, number one, confidence in our own abilities. Number two, self-acceptance. Number three, not worrying about what others think. And number four, optimism. Low self-esteem, in bracket, we have a negative view of ourselves, end bracket. This tends to lead to, number one, lack of confidence. Number two, want to be/look like somebody else. Number three, always worrying what others might think. And number four, pessimism. There are several ways of measuring self-esteem. For example, Herald Self-Esteem Inventory is a questionnaire comprising of 15 statements about a range of interests. Another example is the Thematic Apperception Test, the TAT, which is a neutral cartoon given to the participant, who then has to devise a story about what's going on. Morse and Gergen in 1970 showed that in uncertain or anxiety aroused situations, our self-esteem may change rapidly. Participants were waiting for a job interview in a waiting room. They were sat with another candidate, in bracket, a confederate of the experimenter, end bracket. In one of the two conditions, A, Mr. Clean, dressed in a smart suit, carrying a briefcase, open to reveal a slide rule and books, or number two, or B, Mr. Dirty, dressed in an old t-shirt and jeans, slouched over a cheap sex novel. Self-esteem of the participants with Mr. Dirty increased, while those with Mr. Clean decreased. No mention was made how this affected subjects' performance in the interview. Level of self-esteem affects performance at numerous tasks, though, in brackets, Copper-Smith, 1967, end bracket, so could expert Mr. Dirty subjects to perform better than Mr. Clean? Even though self-esteem might fluctuate, there are times when we continue to believe good things about ourselves even when evidence to the contrary exists. This is known as the perseverance effect. Miller and Ross, 1975, showed that people who believed they had socially desirable characteristics continued in this belief even when the experimenters tried to get them to believe the opposite. Does the same thing happen with bad things if we have low self esteem? That's a question. Okay, maybe not. Perhaps with very low self esteem, all we believe about ourselves might be bad. Okay, Argyle in 2008 believes there are four major factors that influence self esteem. Number one, reaction to others. If people admire us, flatter us, speak out, or seek out our company, listen attentively, and agree with us, we tend to develop a positive self image. If they avoid us, neglect us, tell us things about ourselves that we don't want to hear, we develop a negative self image. Number two, comparison with others. If the people we compare ourselves with, in bracket or reference group, end bracket, appear to be more successful, happier, richer, better looking than ourselves, we tend to develop a negative self image. But if they are less successful than us, our image will be positive. Number three, social roles. Some social roles carry prestige, e.g., a doctor, airline pilot, TV presenter, premiership footballer, and this promotes self-esteem. Other roles carry a stigma, e.g., a prisoner or a mental hospital patient, a refuse collector, or unemployed person. Number four, identification. Roles aren't just out there. They're also become a part of our personality, i.e., we identify with the positions we occupy, the roles we play, and the groups we belong to. Okay, but just as important as all these factors are the influence of our parents. In bracket, see Cooper Smith's research, end bracket. The ideal self, what you'd like to be, end bracket. If there is a mismatch between how you see yourself, in bracket, e.g., your self-image, end bracket, and what you'd like to be, in brackets, e.g., your ideal self, end bracket, then this is likely to affect how much you value yourself. Therefore, there is an intimate relationship between the self-image and the ego ideal and self-esteem. Humanistic psychologists study this using the Q-sort method. A person's ideal self may not be consistent with what actually happens in the life and experience of the person. Hence, a difference may exist between a person's ideal self and the actual experience. This is called incongruence. Now, if you're an incongruent, you're a little more separated. If you're congruent, you can see the overlap here. This looks like the Vesica Pisces, doesn't it? We'll read these little bullet points down below. If you're incongruent, the self-image is different to the ideal self. There is only a little overlap, and here self-actualization will be difficult. It will be difficult to really know yourself if you are incongruent. Okay, if you're congruent, the self-image is similar to the ideal self. There is more overlap, as you can see, and this person can self-actualize. Where a person's ideal self and actual experience are consistent or very similar, a state of congruence exists. Rarely, if ever, does the total state of congruence exist. All people experience a certain amount of incongruence. The development of congruence is dependent on unconditional positive reward. Rogers believed that for a person to achieve self-actualization, they must be in a state of congruence. Michael Argyle in 2008 says there are four major factors which influence its development. Number one, the ways in which others, in bracket particularly significant others, end bracket, react to us. Number two, how we think we compare to others. Number 3, our social roles. Number 4, the extent to which we identify with other people. Mind exercise number 4, self. As I just read the article, as we can see, they've been doing studies into the psychology of how we gauge value and how we interact with one another based on the opinions or outsourcing how we are within us through other people, even to the point of gauging our value based on what we do for a living or the roles we play. Is that true self-actualization? Let us try and do the Who Am I 20 question exercise and see where we fall, where we land with the answers that we give. Are we incongruent? Incongruent being needing others' approval or seeking others' approval, finding out about the experimentations that have been done on human beings for well over a half a century at least, in the article I just shared, should tell you about the manipulation capabilities through media, magazines, social standards, class, the old saying of divide or oppress, things that make you feel less than the divine sovereign that you are. Self-actualization is, after all, what we're after. To know oneself without care of how others will shame, bully, or put asunder, no matter what type of testing, experimentation. It is up to us to stand. Do not allow anyone to have such authority over your self-actualization. To be congruent with oneself is something that we're looking for all to achieve. Yes, everybody, especially who may be my age or even 30 and above, has fallen into incongruence at some point or another, worrying about how we will pay the bills, feed our children, things of that nature. But did it actually have to do damage to our self-actualization? Knowing oneself, knowing everything that is within us, each and every one of us, we should all be walking in the status of congruence, being able to self-actualize, no longer outsourcing our actions or determining our actions based on how somebody else may respond or bully, shame, put asunder, especially with your self-actualization, the actions and the things that you do from your nature are not to harm or to hurt anyone. So why would society do such things to one another? Why would we shame each other? Why would we want anybody to feel any less than anybody else? Think about the exercise that was done with the applicants, with Mr. Clean and Mr. Dirty. Would it be surprising to find out that Mr. Dirty was the one with the PhD? Mr. Clean was the one that dropped out of school in 6th grade. Mr. Dirty was the one who qualified for that position. Maybe it was a programmer. Maybe it was an engineer, pilot, doctor. Mr. Dirty had enough self-actualization and value within himself that he did not need to impress anybody else. He had the self-actualization to be comfortable in his own skin, to be happy, to be filled, to have his self-esteem and self-worth intact. I just gave you that as food for thought. After all, you know that was an experiment that was done to our fellow human beings, which made many feel bad about themselves and made others feel better about themselves. What does that say about us as a people if we are still looking at one another with eyes of that nature, judging by the wrapper and not by the actual being, not by the heart, not by the divine essence that resides within each of us equally. So let's come out of shame. Let's come out of guilting one another. Let's come out of any roles that this matrix tries to put on us, as I would consider those to be labels. We do not need roles, labels, or anything of that manner. Actually, ripping away those labels will lift up your self-esteem. Stop caring what everybody thinks. If you're not hurting anybody, it does not matter what they think. Of course, when it comes to your spouse and taking care of your children, yes, we want to be, as parents, lifting our children up, assuring them they can do, be, and are anything and everything already. Hence, no worries of conformity, shaming, or being boxed in to any type of role. I hope that in this mind exercise that you have gained some understanding on some actual tests actual events, studies that have been done on mankind. Like I said in that article, displayed at least over a half a century of studies of the sociological self-esteem, self-awareness. So let's be congruent. As I showed you, it looked like Vesica Pisces. Let's stand in perseverance. Do not waver. Do not let anyone make you feel less than, because that's false. It's false. Enjoy doing your I am exercise. Find out for yourself. Know for yourself what it is within you that you need to work on, as I do for myself. And when I make improvements within myself, it's for me. It's not to please anybody else. If we're doing things to please the world or to fit in, then we will never come into congruence and self-actuality with full understanding of who we truly are. Stretch your mind. Think on these things. The link to that article will be in the description box below. End of mind exercise self. Number 4.